अज़ीज़ान गिरामी क़द्र हज़रात के सामने मैं आप जिस शख्सियत को दावत देने जा रहा हूँ, ये वो शख्सियत है कि जो अपने कलाम के जरिए से, अपने नाम के जरिए से हर दिल को फतह करने की कुदरत रखते हैं। आज इनकी इंग्लिश स्पीच होगी, खिताब होगा, तो मैं ये अल्फाज इसलिए इनके तारुफ के हवाले से कह रहा हूँ क्योंकि ये खालिद है और खालिद बिन वलीद वो है कि जिस मैदान में भी उतरते उस मैदान को फतेह कर लेते। पूछा क्यों? कहा कि मैंने अपनी दस्तार में सरकार के मुंह मुबारक जो सी रखे, इस बरकत से जिस मैदान में भी उतरता हूं उस मैदान को फतेह कर लेता हूं। तो मैंने ये अपने अरसाए नकाबत, जिसमें 20 साल का अरसा मुझे गुजरा है, कि खालिद जिसका भी नाम देखा है, जिस काम में भी देखा है, उसको उस काम में फातेह देखा है। तो दिलों की दुनिया को फतेह कर लेने वाली शख्सियत जनाब हजरत वाला शान जनाब किबला मोहम्मद खालिद अत्तारी, आप इंग्लिश स्पीच पर पढ़ेंगे तो जो फरमाइएगा, दुरूद शरीफ पढ़िए।
अल्हम्दुलिल्लाहि रब्बिल आलमीन वस्सलातु वस्सलामु अला सय्यिदिल मुरसलीन अम्मा बाद अऊज़ु बिल्लाहि मिनश शैतानिर रजीम बिस्मिल्लाहिर रहमानिर रहीम। Please repeat after me. As-salatu was-salamu alayka ya Rasulullah wa ala alika wa ashabika ya Habiballah. As-salatu was-salamu alayka ya Nabiyallah wa ala alika wa ashabika ya Nurullah. My dearest learned brothers, there are many blessings in reciting Durud Pak upon the Prophet of Allah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. The Prophet of Allah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam instructs us, he tells us that we should perform our faraiz hajj. And we all know that hajj is farz upon us if we are physically and financially capable. The Prophet of Allah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam said that if you perform that faraiz hajj, you will get the same sawab, the same blessings as if you participated in 25 holy wars in which the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself participated. Then the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam went on to say that he who sends Durud Pak upon me, he gets the same sawab. Zara sochiye कि young or old, we can only perform Hajj once. Farz to ek hi dafa, it's only Hajj farz upon us once. And nobody here can participate in a battle in which the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself participated in. But young or old, weak or strong, rich or poor, we can all send Durud Pak upon the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sallu ala al-Habib. My dear Islamic brothers, the time is very, very short. So as we know that the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the best of creation, we know that if it was not for him, we would not be here today, and none of this would be around with us today. But we also know that it is fard upon us to love the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that none of you believes until he loves me more than his children, his parents, and all people. In another hadith, he says that none of you believes until he loves me more than he loves himself. But how do we love? How do we show our love? Sirf कहने से नहीं होता. To show love is not just by saying it. We all say that we love the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but do we really actually love him in true sense? The Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was asked, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when will I become a mu'min? And the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam replied that this will be when you love Allah azza wa jalla. Now the companions, they were very lucky. They had the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in front of them. Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you've told us that will become a moment when we love Allah azza wa jalla. But when will we love Allah azza wa jalla? And the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam replied that this will be when you love the Rasul. When you love the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Next question, when will I love the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Now we all claim it. We all say we are lovers. But we need to know the criterion. What is the criterion to prove that we love? Just saying it is not enough. So they asked, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you've told us that to become a mu'min you need to love Allah azza wa jalla. To love Allah azza wa jalla, you need to love the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. How will I love? How will I know that I love the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? The Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam replied, listen, this will be when you follow his orders, when you follow his footsteps, when you observe his sunnah, when you love the people who love him, and you hate the people who hate you. Then you can claim that you truly love the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Sahaba Kiram, they were the perfect example. They were the perfect example of true lovers of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And just to give you an incident, just one incident, to show you their love. There was an incident in which the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he bought a horse. He bought a horse from a Jew. And he said to the Jew that here is the money. I will come at such and such time to collect the horse. So that time came, and the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came and said, look, I come to collect my horse. Now the Jew looked at the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and said, who are you? I don't know who you are. The Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, look, I came, I bought this horse of you, I gave you this money at such a time, I told you I would come at this time, and I've come to collect the horse now. And the Jew said, who are you? I don't know who you are. If you are telling the truth, produce a witness. Now the Jew knew that at that time there was nobody there was no witnesses. And you can imagine that whilst all this was going on, many people started to gather around. A lot of people gathered around to see what was going on. And one Sahaba, Hazrat Khuzaimah radiallahu anhu, he said, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what is the problem here? The Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam replied that I bought this horse of this person, and now he's telling me that produce a witness. Hazrat Khuzaimah radiallahu anhu said, I am your witness. The Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam looked at him and said, what are you saying? And he said, I swear that you bought this horse of this Jew. What can the Jew do? And he stuck, had to give the horse. So he gave the horse and he went away. And the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam looked at Hazrat Khuzaimah radiallahu anhu and said, Ya Khuzaimah, you weren't there. You didn't see me give the transaction. You didn't see me buy the horse. How do you know? How do you know whether I bought this horse or not? Allah, listen to his answer. He said, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, have we seen heaven? Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, have we seen hell? Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, have we seen Allah Azza wa Jal? Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if on your saying we can believe in heaven, if on your saying we can believe on hell, if on your saying we can believe in Allah Azza wa Jal, can we not believe that you bought a horse from this Jew? Allah. This is love. This is true love. And that companion, how lucky he was. Because when he said these words, the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam smiled at him. What a lucky person that the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is love. This is love. Someone wants to ask, what is the difference between Kalimullah? Hazrat Musa alayhi salam was given the title of Kalimullah, and our Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was given the title of Habibullah. What is the difference between the two? The reply was that Kalimullah, he wants to make Allah Azza wa Jalla happy. Habibullah, Allah wants to make happy. Kalimullah loves Allah Azza wa Jalla. Allah Azza wa Jalla loves Habibullah. Kalimullah, he went up into the mountains, he stayed there for 40 days and 40 nighs, and he was only granted one glimpse. But Habibullah was raised up to the heavens and he met his Lord. This is the status of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we need to show that we are happy with the coming of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We need to be proud of who we are. We need to be proud of him as well and show this love. And through this month we show this love. But what we also need to do is we need to remember what the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came for and what he brought to us as well. And as the speaker said in the first English speak, that to celebrate the coming of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam should not be just restricted to this one day. Because then it's like the example, like if there's a child and his father gives him a really nice car, for example. He gives him a red Ferrari, for example, yeah? And when he gives him the car, he's so happy, he's telling everybody, I'm so happy I've got this car, you know, and he's telling everybody, he's texting everybody, and he's putting his pictures on social websites, and he's so happy about it. And he's driving it, and he's looking after it, and then at the end of the month, he puts the car in the garage, and he leaves it there, and forgets about it. And then 1 year later, he takes the car, and he's happy again, and he's showing it. This is not the way we should be. And that's what's happening with Muslims today. We become part-time Muslims. We go on the julus, and we say we love the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We'll say we die for the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We'll say we follow the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then the month comes, the month goes, and we forget about it. This is not love. This is not love. We need to remember what the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam brought as well. The Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his final speech on the 9th of Zulhajj in the plains of Arafat, he said, I leave you two things. If you follow them, you will never go astray. The Quran and my way. You know, जो हमारे बुजुर्ग है ना, वो मेरी बात को समझ गए. The youngsters won't really understand this, but there was a time in this country where we didn't have mobile phones. We didn't have mobile phones, yeah? And there was a time where we didn't have internet and all these things. And so what used to happen was our elders, they used to contact their family back home in Pakistan with letters. एक ज़माना था कि ख़तों किताबत थी. यही था और कुछ नहीं था. And they used to send letters. And it used to be every 2 months or every month they used to send a letter. And then times, in the 70s, when our elders used to go back to Pakistan, they didn't used to go back every 3 months, every 6 months. It was very hard in them times to go back. People used to go back after 10 years, 15 years, sometimes 20 years. Can you imagine? अब ज़रा सोचिए, अब 15 साल बाद आप वापस जाते, you go back home after 15 years, and you go meet your mother, और माँ कहती है बेटा, मैंने आपको खत लिखे हैं. उन खतों के अंदर बहुत अहम चीजें थे. Some very important things in the letters. Some very important things that you needed to know. अगर बेटा ये जवाब दे कि माँ, मैं तो बहुत मसरूफ था, मैंने खत ही नहीं खोला. माँ को कितना दुख होगा. How upset will mother be that you didn't have? तो आप कहें माँ तो आपको पैसे भेजता रहूं, मैं पैसे बनाता रहूं, मैं ये करता हूं, माँ को फिर भी दुख होगा. Mother will be so upset. But what about that letter that was sent to us through his abuse? Have we ever opened that? Have we ever read the Quran? Do we know what is in the Quran? That letter that was sent to us that tells us what we need to know, what we should do, what we should not do. Afsos, we all look at our mobile phone more than we look at the Quran. हम देखते कुरान मोबाइल फोन के कई मैसेज आ गए, कोई पैगाम आ गया. But what about that message that came to us? That is more important than what is inside your mobile phone. We don't have time to read it. हम घरों में सजाते हैं, we put it on a high shelf. We wrap it up in a nice piece of material. We put it there. Once a year we take it down, kiss it, read a few ayats, close it and put it back there. ये हक अदा नहीं किया हमने कुरान पाक. In some houses, until somebody passes away, they don't know where the Quran Pak is. हमारे घर में कुरान पाक कहाँ है? We don't know. कितना शर्म की बात है. That we call ourselves Muslims. We say we are Muslims. We say we are lovers, but we know so little. And just to give you an example, all of you are here today. I'm not going to ask you to answer this question, but I want you to think. That if I was to ask the people in this room today to name me 10 football players, 10 cricketers, 10 film stars, 10 politicians, many of you will succeed. Lekin, if I was to say to you, name me the Ashra Mubashra, the 10 companions that were guaranteed paradise. Name me 10 prophets. We would struggle. As Muslims, we know more about football, cricket, politicians, films, Bollywood, blah, blah, blah. And we know little about the companions of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Isn't this embarrassing? Isn't this a shame that we know so little about this? You know when you go to the doctors, and you say, doctor, I'm ill. Doctor will look at you, he checks you and he gives you a prescription. Go and take this medicine. Take this medicine and inshallah you'll be okay. Now imagine if you went back to the doctors 3 years, 3 months later. You go back to the doctor 3 months later and you say, doctor, I'm more ill. What's the first thing the doctor's going to say? Did you take the medicine? And if you say, oh no doctor, the prescription is in my pocket. What's he going to say? He's going to say, you're wasting your time, why do you come to me? Remember, the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, I leave you 2 things, the Quran and my way. Follow them, you will never go astray. Aajkal, hi, mere bachche. Hi, meri beti. Hi, meri beti. I leave you the Quran and my way. Follow them and you will never go astray. Duai hum kha nahi rahe aur hi hum kar rahe. We have the Quran in our house. We have the Sunnah with us. And we're not following it. We're not adopting this. We're wasting our time, we're wasting our lives. Because of this, we're losing everything that we have. And we need to wake up before it's too late.